Hello, and welcome to episode 30 of 50 Women Over 50, a podcast for women whose personal confidence is born of experience. I am your host, Sherrilynne Starkie. In this interview series, I'm talking to 50 women from all walks of life who are over 50 years of age about what they've learned by this decade so that we can all learn from them. Today, I'm welcoming to the show leadership expert Heather Marasse. She's a former client of mine, and she's a fellow podcaster. In fact, we worked together on a podcast a couple of years ago. Her 50s were all about breaking patterns. She broke relationship patterns with her husband, her daughters, and her employer. In fact, she went quite a bit down the road towards a divorce before reconsidering and reconciling with her husband. In this interview, she shares with us her story of second chances and how, in her 50s, she fell back in love with her one and only. Tell me about your 50th birthday.
I honestly can't remember my 50th birthday.
Yeah.
So I went into my pictures, my photographs, and I was able to see what had happened to me that year. One thing I know for sure is, and I told my family this, I don't want any parties. I don't want a big surprise thing. That's not what I want. And it's not really what we do as a family. Yeah. We like to get together and just have a intimate gathering and just enjoy some nice food and each other's company. And another thing that happened on my 50th year was my husband's grandmother turned 100. So that was a big deal for our family. She lived in Saskatchewan. So we had plans to go as a family to celebrate with everyone. And that year, one of my daughters was getting sicker and sicker with a chronic illness. And we just didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do because she technically was an adult at the time and she was seeing her own doctor and everything. But on the morning we were going to fly to go to her great-grandmother's birthday celebration, she said, I can't go. She was too sick to go. Oh. So my husband and my other daughter went and I stayed home with her. And It was like a turning point for our whole family because we realized something has to change here. She's so sick. She needs help. She's not getting the help she needs. I'm going to need to get involved. Yeah. I need to clear my work schedule and just be here for her in whatever way is going to help. So yeah, it was a turning point. Big time.
Two things there that are interesting. First of all, the juxtaposition of a 50-year-old birthday and a 100-year-old birthday. Did it make you feel like a spring chicken?
I never even thought about that. All I remember about one of the most vivid memories I have of my husband's grandmother is the first time I met her. She was wearing a yellow polka dot bikini and little white high-heeled shoes. And she had her makeup all done, and she was so pleasant and welcoming. She was just an amazing woman. Right. So, yeah, that's my... So, no, I didn't feel like a spring chicken because she didn't feel like an old one.
Oh, I see.
Even at 100.
Excellent. And then, so you had some pretty serious issues to deal with when you were just turning 50. So that makes me think that you probably... we're too busy to really worry about, am I getting old? And I got a line on my face and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I think 40 was more of a, confronting for me than 50 because you're right. I was just a little preoccupied that year and for the next decade right. With a whole bunch of things that just started coming apart.
Right.
I wonder if that happens more than we realize for our fifth. I guess it's our sixth decade.
Yes.
Everything we've been trying to accomplish and hold together and keep together just starts to come undone a little bit. And it's time to regroup. At least that's what I found in the 50s.
Give me an example of something that came undone.
Well, in a way, our family did, because with my daughter's illness, it had a real impact on my other daughter,
right,
who decided she needed to leave and go to Korea and live for a few years.
Right.
So that pulled the family apart. my husband and I realized that our marriage was not working. Well, it wasn't that it wasn't working. It was kind of that it was over. We had spent so much time and energy trying to keep this together and support our kids and, do life, have 2 careers and acquire all the things you acquire and have all the things.
Mm-hmm.
And we realized that it had gotten to a point where there was not much between he and me anymore. So it wasn't that it was a bad marriage. It just felt like it was over.
So
we told the truth about it.
This is something that you, like I haven't personally experienced, but you do hear these stories of people that once they get their kids raised up and out and on their own, and then they look at it across the table at each other and they say, we have nothing in common anymore.
Yeah.
So do you think it was kind of like that?
A little bit, yeah.
And so you separated?
Yeah, I think until we separated. Like, I think we were both dealing with my eldest daughter's health crisis in our own way and not really coming together around it.
Right.
And so, yeah, we decided it was time to take a break, really.
Right.
And both of us thought we were on the path of divorce, but we also said to each other, we want to honor each other and what we've built together, and we want to treat each other with dignity. And so it was probably the weirdest house hunting trip we ever went on, where I think both of my daughters, or at least one of them, was with him and me, and we were going with a real estate agent looking at other properties for him. We were splitting up, and we were all going to find a place that we all liked for him.
Right.
And he, moved into a place that was walking distance from where I live. But, he and I had been together since I was 17.
Yes.
And he was 20. And neither of us had ever lived alone. So we had full intentions of getting a divorce. We both had a lawyer and we saw a mediator. And it was at the mediation meeting when he started defending why I shouldn't have to pay him a certain amount of money.
Right.
As we looked at the assets, and I thought, this is a really good guy. And I remember driving home from that mediation meeting thinking, is this really what I want?
Yeah.
And I just started noticing how he's just a really kind man.
Right.
But we sort of lost sight of each other.
How long were you separated?
How old was I? I think I was 52 or 53. And we separated for 18 months. And then we got back. We decided, well, you know what? We don't want anyone else. And we actually do get along quite well. We do have things in common beyond our children. If I'm going to spend time with anyone, I find myself looking for you.
Right.
And so we decided it was a waste of money to have 2 places. Although we did talk about what would really be perfect is to have one house with 2 separate homes, but we could go and hang out together, but then we could go back to our own spaces.
Hey, listen, I know a couple in the UK that have done that. They bought a duplex and second marriage for both of them. And he lives on one side and she lives on the other side with her kids. And although they're legally married, and then, he has his own space and she has his space to be autonomous with her family. So sometimes you just got to think outside the box about what's going to work for you.
Yeah, it really, because we both are pretty autonomous and we liked having that separate space.
Yeah.
We both realized we needed it. And that's probably why we needed to have a time out. So we call it our second marriage. We're both on our second marriage. Just happens to be to
same
each
person
other again.
What a lovely story. But how did you I know it's 18 months. How did you like being alone? Like cooking for one and only having to make up half the bed. Like how it's the small things that you really feel when you're alone. How did that sit with you?
Well, for the most part, I loved it. I still love it.
Yeah.
Like if he has to go away or is out golfing. I love having his house to myself. For my career, I was always on the road.
Right.
And so I never actually got to live in my house. And when I did come home, I became the maid to some degree. And so it was never really a place where I could rest.
Yeah.
And so finally I got to live in my own house. I redecorated. I hired a decorator, a designer.
Yeah.
And I thought, I want this to be my space now. And, I love it. So.
Nice.
Mm-hmm. Other than the first night after he moved out, and it was like there's all these holes in my bedroom where his clothes had been, his stuff had been. That was devastating. That was a rough night.
Yeah, I bet. And so did you date?
Oh God, no. Oh, yuck.
Okay.
That's not why I wanted out.
Okay.
No. I think what I needed was to just be with me.
Yeah.
I needed to find her again. Yeah.
Yeah. You reminded me of this couple I know that have just decided to separate. They've just announced it. They've been married 34 years.
Yeah.
And they're at retirement age. They're 65 now. So they're retiring. And he's decided, I don't know how many years I got left, but I know I don't want them to be with you. And yeah.
Ouch.
Oh yeah. It's not pretty to watch, that's for sure.
No. I feel very lucky. That's not the reason either of us. I mean, I was the one who initiated it, as my husband said, when we were telling our daughters. Their first question was, who decided this? Like, who prompted this? They wanted to know which of us.
Yeah.
And my husband answered, he said, well, your mother was the one with the courage to tell the truth about it. But I also want this.
Right.
So there's an example of why I decided there might be some hope. Because I felt like the bad guy.
Yes.
My daughters were both really worried about their father. It's funny, they weren't worried about me.
Yeah,
and actually,
I'm not surprised to hear that.
And when we decided that we were going to, reconnect and move back in, our daughters were a little like, I don't know, I thought they'd be happier. But the truth is they had seen how unhappy we had gotten.
Right.
They didn't, and how happy we had been on our own together, that they were worried that we'd screw it up again.
So that's what now, 8 years in the past now, 9 years?
Yeah, let me think. Yeah. Somewhere in there. I'd have to go through my photo album.
Yeah. But I'm just asking for the time just to say, did you like settle back into old ways, or, did you take what you had learned from the experience into making your relationship go the distance?
There are some patterns that have come back, but I think one of the things that I'll speak for myself, I realized that if anyone needed to do work, it was me. I couldn't work on him. And so I got much more serious in my 50s about my own inner journey, doing my own developmental work, getting more curious about who's in here and what's this thing that we're all in called life. What's it about? What's my life going to be about? And I guess that was like a gift I was giving myself, because I now had the space to do it. Both my daughters, took on their own growth journey, healing journey. They're both well established now. They're both married. I have 2 grandsons. So I don't need to worry about them. I stopped worrying about them.
Mm-hmm.
And I stopped worrying about fixing my husband and my marriage. And I just focused more on, well, what do I want? What's my life about now?
And so was that the impetus to go into business for yourself?
That was one of the things, my 50s was about breaking patterns, I guess, if I were to look back and say, what was this all about? I broke patterns with my daughters. I broke patterns with my husband. I broke patterns with a previous employer, which led to me very reluctantly starting my own company. I never really wanted to do that, but it got to be the only option for me. So that broke a pattern of avoiding taking full ownership of who I am in a business sense too. Then I had to ante up and tell the truth about, I actually have a business here. And so my husband was my partner in that. And I have, a couple colleagues, as you well know, that started it with me. And and then I've let that go in the last 4 months.
And so
another pattern.
Right. Well, before we talk about the future, let's talk a little bit more about just comparing who you are now to who you were as a younger woman. What advice would you give yourself as a 30-year-old?
Slow down and trust that inner whisper. We have a lot of inner noise, voices, and the ones that were the loudest for me were all about work hard, provide for the family, be a good mom, be a good wife, be a good daughter, serve your customers so that they don't want to go anywhere else, be a good business partner, be a leader in the business, all of these pushy voices. And until I took a pause and started slowing down, I couldn't hear the kinder voices inside of me, that were saying it's okay to rest. It's okay to tell the truth about your marriage. It's okay to say you don't know how to help your daughter.
Yeah.
And so it would be slow down, sit down, and listen until the noise stops.
Yeah. So a lot of what you've just said there, certainly resonates with me. This, the loud voice about, do it faster, do it better, be the best. Make sure everyone knows that you are fulfilling your duty. It's about duty, right? But this is
duty. Being a good girl, having it all. That was a big one for me, and I think my generation, because I'm a little older than you.
Not much. I think I mentioned on another episode that the having it all thing, they did tell us that we could have it all. And the joke for me was I got it all the debt, all the work, all the responsibility. All the housework, all the financial, I got it all. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Told me I could have it. And I'll tell you what, I was quite shocked when I came to the realization, and I don't know how old I was before I figured this out. And maybe I haven't even really figured it out. I keep learning it, that as long as you put your plate up and say, I will take on more, people are very happy to fill your plate. And say, have more. You can do it all. I trust you to get it done.
It's funny. My father's voice is coming to me right now as you say that, because, I grew up in a house of hardworking people. And my dad used to say, if you're willing to work, there's work to be done.
I remember feeling conned when I was a young mother and the dad had gone and was on my own. And I was like, they conned me. Just a second. This isn't what I thought it was going to be. That's when you're at the bottom of the well and you're looking up and you're like, this is not the perspective I expected to see.
Seriously.
Yeah.
And I can remember in my early 30s when I had 2 little kids and the job and everything, and I was having that conned feeling like you're talking about. And I would look up the organizational chart to see, who's doing what it seems like I'm going to have to do here. And there were no women above me. I worked at Bell Canada, like 45,000 people. Yeah. And the only women on the chart above me, and there were few of them, like probably less than a dozen out of those 45 people, none of them had their own children.
Right. Yeah.
They had married somebody, or actually some of them weren't married, but I couldn't see a model to follow. There was nobody showing me the way.
Yeah.
And it didn't look or feel feasible. So
the other side of that comment that you're making me think about is, so the young women coming up behind us, they're looking at you and me, right? Because we're the ones to show them the way. And, my daughters took the lesson, was like, mom's way is not my way. you know? Like, I do not want to work as hard as my mother did. I am taking a different path in life. And both my daughters very happy. One's a nurse, one's a teacher, but they are, not driving business women, and they have the work-life balance. I won't say it's 100% worked out, but it's a lot better than what I had. That's for sure. So
I have two daughters too, and they both do work really hard. But what I notice about them is they're not willing to put up with the crap that I did as a woman. And, they'll tell me about how they were in a situation and, some misogyny was happening, and they just put their foot down. And a part of me like cringes when they're telling me this story, thinking, you can't do that. You can't. And then I realize, but they did, and it worked. That would never have flown when I was in their situation. But that's just how far we've come. Yeah. And I'm actually really proud of them. And I'm also proud of the men that they work with and live with that are like, yeah, good point. Let me think about this. So.
Yeah, because sometimes I think the guys don't even realize that what they're doing is how we perceive it. They don't, it's not their intention. They just don't.
No.
Yeah.
It is all, a lot of what we're up against these days really is unconscious bias.
Yes.
Like it's unconscious, but it's still bias. So
what are you most hopeful about these days?
Well, I think I am hopeful about, the generations behind me, the waking up that's happening. I was reading this thing yesterday. I wrote it down here. Otto Scharmer, who is a professor at MIT, he talked about what we're in right now. He called it the current planetary polycrisis. What a great term. There's so many crises right now.
Yes.
Climate change, the Me Too stuff, the ecologies, all the social injustices, the racism, and all the economy, the geopolitical situation. And what I'm hopeful about is, even though the generations behind me, I know they feel like they've been handed a bit of a mess, I also see a lot more courage in those generations, a lot more willingness to speak the truth, to try and understand what's going on and how they want it different. So I really am. I'm hopeful about that. I think it's going to take a while. It's going to be a while for us to dismantle some of the systems that have gotten us here. Mm-hmm. But it's time. And until that does happen, the new order can't emerge. So I'm hopeful. I really am.
I agree with you. I would say, like, we've been walking this planet for millennium.
Yeah.
It's not the first time. I mean, we've gone through ice ages and world wars and, enslaved entire nations. And yet here we are. So I think that humans are pretty resilient.
Well, so much has changed with, the internet has made everything, all this data so available and all the disinformation and information. And it's forced a level of thinking, not amongst everyone, but amongst a great deal of our global population that's required to tackle what we're up against. I mean, what got us here isn't going to get us there. And I actually am really encouraged by what I see in the generations like the youth and the young adults right now. They are not putting up with the stuff that I used to put up with. They are calling it.
Yeah. Where do you see yourself in 10 years?
Well, like a lot of your other guests, I think I'll always be busy. I don't know that it's always going to be for commercial gain, but I see myself continuing to. I've just started in this past 4-5 months, really put into my calendar a nice balance of a little bit of quotes work, but also lots of time for walking and more exercise, friends, family, grandchildren, and really staying true to only taking on what I want to do. Mm-hmm. And making sure that it satisfies, is it going to be fun? And is it going to be interesting? Can I learn and grow from this? Yeah. If I can answer those 3 questions with a yes, I'll find a way to put it into my calendar. So I think I'll probably still be doing that at 71.
Good for you. Yeah. I think those are words to live by. Is it fun? Is it interesting? Is it something I want to do?
Yeah.
Okay, quick round. What are you reading, watching, binging?
Well, I'm doing I'm reading, I'm watching, and I'm also listening. So what I'm watching, I can't even tell you how much I am just riveted by Succession, that series. Have you seen it?
Oh, yes.
I love it. Just when you think the worst of people couldn't get worse, they never fail to disappoint me further. It's just fascinating to see how these characters devolve deeper and deeper down their ego structure. So I'm fascinated by that one. And then another one that my husband and I love, you're going to laugh, is something called Time Team.
Oh, I know all about Time Team. I know
it's British. It's British, and it's been going on for, I don't know how many seasons, 20-some seasons.
Yes.
These archaeologists who go and they have 3 days in some sort of fabulous location in the British Isles, and they excavate, and you learn a little history. There's, funny characters, and it's real, and you see the English countryside or the British Isles countryside. And my husband and I watch it usually an episode a night.
I think it's an example of what makes the BBC so special. Mm-hmm. Can you imagine the pitch meeting if that was in I don't know, Netflix or something? Well, maybe Netflix would go for it, but let's say NBC. Yeah. We're going to get a bunch of odd people, real nerdy people that aren't very photogenic. And we're going to go and dig in dirt until we find some bones. Never flown, but the BBC was like, you know what? I think we got something.
And it's been on for so long. You can watch each of them age through it. It's so hilarious. I mean, they all had hair at the start of it. Most of the men don't. I mean, it's just, we really enjoy that one. And the reading I've been doing, I've a mix, but I'm currently reading Lessons in Chemistry. My oldest daughter recommended that one to me. So it's interesting. It's pretty popular right now. I recommend it. And I'm also reading The Myth of Normal by Gabor Mate. Okay. He's a really impressive Canadian doctor, therapist, teacher. I don't know how else to call it, but he worked for decades in Vancouver with the high needs population around addiction and a lot of Indigenous as well as non. And he has some pretty amazing revelations and guidance around what we think is normal. and it's all related to trauma.
Right.
So and it's related to trauma and who we are as spiritual beings, as well as physical beings and how that impacts our physical health. So, yeah, I see him as one of our bright lights for sure.
Okay.
Like a lot of people are listening to him.
I'll put a link to it in the show notes.
Yeah. And there's a podcast that I've been listening to that I've been really enjoying. It's called The Trauma Informed Lawyer.
Okay.
A lawyer, a woman, Myrna McCallum, originally from Saskatchewan, which is where I'm from. Maybe that's why I got interested in it. I think she's in BC now. But she's all about addressing the issue in the legal profession to bring more trauma-informed approaches to lawyering, if you like, and the judicial system. Because, of course, everybody who ends up coming into that system, it's usually as a product of trauma. I mean, yeah. I listen to that, and then I listen to yours. I listen to every episode. I love it. And I listen to Glennon Doyle's We Can Do Hard Things. Yes. Love that one. I listen to Armchair Expert with Dax Shepard and Monica Padman. They're hilarious and always have interesting guests. So I enjoy podcasts a lot.
Me too. Is there an app you couldn't live without?
The one that came to mind immediately, and one of your guests has already mentioned it, is Insight Timer.
Oh, yes.
I was using that before it was cool, I think. But it's just a free meditation app. And I forget how many thousand hours because I've been involved in my own spiritual practice and mindfulness for a long time now.
Is there anything I haven't asked you about that you'd like to share?
Well, I guess as I was thinking about this before you and I started our conversation, I like what Jane Fonda said about life. She said she views it as there are 3 acts, and she's in her 3rd. And I feel like I'm moving into my 3rd. And you could liken it to, for women, there's the expression maiden, mother, and crone.
Yes.
And crone has a negative connotation in our culture, but they are wise women.
Yes.
And I am really thrilled to be in the 3rd act. I feel so lucky to have had such great first 2 acts. I'm very fortunate and privileged. And I'm going to make sure that the 3rd act, I get everything I can out of it.
This has been 50 Women Over 50, a podcast for women whose personal confidence is born of experience. Thank you to my guest, Heather Marasse. The biggest lesson I took away from this conversation is that even after 50, we're not even close to being done when it comes to personal development. We still have enormous potential to learn and to grow and to change, and the idea of lifelong learning came into full relief in this conversation. So please see the show notes to find the links that you need to connect with Heather online and some of the books and podcasts and other resources we discussed on the show. And join me again for next week's show when I will welcome Lynn Bowman, a glam grandma from California with some great advice about nutrition and healthy eating for those of us who are over 50 years of age. But that's next week. In the meantime, drop me a rating or a review on Apple or wherever you get your podcast from. Let's connect and create a whole community of wise women over 50 by sharing a link to this show with your friends and connections. See you next time on 50 Women Over 50. I'm your host, Sherrilynne Starkie.